Okay, so it's a great privilege to have Matt with us today. He's a friend, a supporter of Through the Roof, and works as an evangelist for his church and has personal experience of disability. I really hope you enjoyed his presentation. If you haven't watched it yet, it's fine. The link is still there, and happy for it to be shared with others in your church or friends or whatever. So do have a look at that if you haven't seen it yet. Matt, can you hear me? Can you speak to us? Are you there?
I don't think Francis has quite got the internet.
Good, there we go. I'm unmuted now. So I think, can you hear me, Tim?
Great, yeah, lovely to have you with us, Matt. Thank you for being with us. Thanks for your presentation. Perhaps if people haven't had a chance to watch it yet, you could just give a kind of 1 minute summary of your key messages, if you're happy to do so.
Yeah, let me try and do that. So I was just making the observation that in terms of the context of things in lockdown, in one sense, the numbers haven't changed of the numbers of disabled people, although we don't know the outcome of COVID long term, but there have been for many of us some new opportunities to connect with our churches that we might not have had before. And then really I based the message that I was giving on 1 Corinthians 12, 22 to 26, which talks about the body being made up of lots of different parts. And Paul, when he's writing there, talks about the parts of the body that seem weaker. And I think it's important just to stress that word, seem weaker, are actually indispensable. And I was trying to make the point that the opportunity that we have, maybe post-lockdown, is not just to sort of reach disabled people, but to hear from them. So it would be a shame if we just thought, well, fantastic, we've now got this one-way platform of reaching disabled people. Now, the Bible would say much more than that, and much more what Through the Roof are seeking to do, which is that we want to receive the gift and the ministry of disabled people into our churches, and that God has designed it so that that is absolutely indispensable. And then finally, just in terms of action, I said it's a brand new world in lots of ways, and I guess there will be a blended option between online and physical, it seems to me. And maybe a good question to ask is, what does this now make possible? So that does that make sense, Tim?
Absolutely, brilliant, perfect summary. Thank you, Matt. Really good.
Can I just preface that again by saying I'm in some ways I'm relatively new to the world of disability. My spinal injury was 7 years ago. For some, that seems a long time. For many of you, that's much shorter. So the things that I'm saying, I'm learning as I go, and I want to learn from people this morning. I don't have all of the answers. This is a strange time we're living in, and let's talk is the point. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, good, and it's good to have the opportunity to talk shortly in our small groups, which will be great. But first, we've got a few questions lined up for you, Matt, and it'd be great just to hear some of your insights. So the first question is from Sue, and she says, one question that springs to mind is, how do we ensure that those people attending online church don't become second-class worshippers, with the first-class worshippers being able to enter a building and receive communion, but online worshippers not being able to share that sacrament? If I can summarize that just briefly into, so if the future is both physical and online church, you mentioned some sort of blended option, how do we ensure that those who are online don't get viewed as second class compared to those who are able to physically attend? Any thoughts on that?
I think it's a really good point and a really helpful question. I guess in part it's going to start with churches teaching on this, teaching very clearly. We're just going to have to go back to the basics right at the start of the Bible, where we're told that we were all made in God's image. So we're going to have to just teach again and just teach into this, so that we're clear that there is no such thing as second-class worshippers. So I think that will, we need to encourage our leadership teams to be having this very much on their radar. And I guess the physical visiting of to disabled people, and the extra hard work of helping them to have helping us to have access to the building as is possible. But I think it's going to need a lot of new resolve and hard work from churches to just teach on that, and then to physically visit. But again, Tim, if you've got thoughts on that, I don't. Those would be my first thoughts.
Oh, great. That's really good, Matt. I'm just thinking, actually, I guess we've, just a comment from myself, really, seen perhaps more disabled people attending online, but also more people who are not connected to church. And so I guess what works for disabled people will work for non-Christians, for people who haven't encountered church, really. And so it's a great
Absolutely.
Position to be in. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Question number 2 is from Rick. How do we persuade the church to pray for people and not for depersonalized problems, for example, the afflicted? So how do we persuade the church to pray for people and not for depersonalized problems? I don't know if you were able to give some insights.
Yeah, it's a really
from that.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and I'll comment on this in a minute. It's very easy to just feel lumped into a group rather than in individuals, and Jesus cares for individuals, doesn't he? So if there are public prayers in the church, if that's what's being referred to, then it's great if people are happy for their name to be shared, so that we're praying for individual people and that we've heard from them during the week. What are the particular things? So I guess there's public prayer, there's small group prayers and individual prayers. The more individual, the more names we can have, and the more that we can be in touch with them regularly to say, look, last week or the week before you asked us to pray for this. Have things changed? Has God answered that prayer? Is there something new that we could be praying for? So communication is going to be ever so important. So it's not just feeling that we've ticked off this group and we've prayed for the afflicted. So I think it's a great point and a great question.
Have you, just an aside, have you ever experienced that in terms of that sort of differentiation between praying for perhaps your healing or for you as a person, Matt? I don't know if you've experienced that.
Yeah, I've certainly experienced. When people have come in who don't know me and haven't prayed as sensitively as they could because they didn't ask me what I particularly wanted to have prayer for. Now, we might have different views on healing. I believe that God can and does. I don't think that he promises it, or that we're meant to claim it. But I guess when someone has looked at me and assumed that the first and the only thing that I would want them to pray for me is healing, I think, particularly 7 years on, I think I wish they'd asked a few more questions, like, what else would you like prayer for? And I'd want to say perseverance and trust and just taking one day at a time and knowing God's love, as well as, sure, if you want to pray for these other things as well, but it's very easy to just sort of lump it into, this is the only thing that's on your radar to want to be prayed for. And I think there's more. We're people, aren't we? Rather than just from the outside assuming that must be the only thing that's on our minds. Yeah.
That's some great insights. Yeah. So I think, it's essential, isn't it? It's about relationships, isn't it? It's about knowing each other. Surely that's the most important principle, rather than assuming. So yeah, good. Thank you, Matt. So question 3 is from Karen. She says, the passage you quoted from 1 Corinthians chapter 12, are you comfortable with the idea that the disabled are weaker? I think you did qualify that a bit this morning. I'm
really glad that Karen raised that, so I had a chance to clarify that for everyone. And yes, I want to be clear. 1 Corinthians 12 talks about those that seem weaker, and I guess that was the point that I was trying to make, that we might seem weaker, rightly or wrongly. And I just want to say some words on that. I guess I want to avoid at one extreme what we've just spoken about, which is this thing that it's easy for disabled people to be sort of lumped together into a class of sort of the vulnerable or the weak, There was lots of talk as lockdown happened, how hard disabled people found it, that in effect it was just, right, there's this group of people, they're very vulnerable, we must hide them away out of sight. Now for some of us that was real and that was needed, and there is particular vulnerability to coronavirus that we needed to hear. For others within the disabled community, they were not sure about that. So one extreme is that we just get lumped into a group of people and society can therefore treat us as weak because we're vulnerable. So I want to be clear, I wasn't saying that. On the other hand, many disabled people feel, particularly with the Paralympic movement, that there can be an expectation on disabled people to do lots of things. I mean, the number of people who said to me within the first few months of me being having a disability was, so are you going to go to the Paralympics? I was like, well, actually, they're very good sportsmen and women. And so the expectation that, and that can mean that those who can't do that, or it's just not even possible to get out of the house, can feel like they're failing in their disability because they're not going to the Paralympics. So I want to avoid those two extremes, and this is quite a complex area, isn't it? Yeah. But the Bible does say that, so I guess I was trying to say that there is a sense in which we seem weaker. Now, I don't think that we are in lots of ways weaker. In many ways, I would say that the people that I've got to know in the last 7 years are stronger in many ways because of what God has done in their lives, because of their endurance through suffering. They're stronger in their hope in eternity because they've had to think about that a lot more. They're stronger in just trusting the Lord in adversity. So Karen's helped me to make it clear that I'm not or was not intending to say that we necessarily are weaker. We might seem weaker. There are strengths, and I think the disabled people therefore are a great gift to the church, because we can speak about suffering and hope and eternity at a time when our culture most needs it as we come out of lockdown. So we have a real strength, and we're a gift to the church, and that's a key thing. Final thought, sorry Tim, on that is there is yet a sense in which I have had to, in the last 7 years, acknowledge weakness, and the Bible is full of weak people. 2 Corinthians 12 says, when I am weak, I am strong. So I have had to embrace weakness as well, and learn that there are things that I need to ask people to do for me. I need a bit more help from my wife and others. And that's been hard for me over the last 7 years to learn. But I hope that's a bit more of a balanced answer, Tim. Does that make sense?
That's great. That's really helpful. Yeah. Thank you, Matt. Good. So fourthly, a question from Janet and Fiona. They ask if you could give us an example of God using your disability to his glory. Don't know if you've got any examples from that.
I guess the number of people who've asked me, how come you haven't lost your faith, or can you trust God in hard times? There's been a fair opportunities in that, just to say, it's only by God's grace that I'm able to keep going and to trust him. I think as well, there is a sort of openness that people have to ask questions that maybe has led to that. But I think, just trusting God, and you don't know what people make of it. You trust that God will use it, and trust that he'll get the glory. So I'm not sure that was. Yeah, no, that's
good. Yeah, that's good, Matt. And then just one final question. I mean, it's great there's so much wisdom here, Matt. It's great to have some insight here, but we've just got one more question, which is from me. So just taking the liberty to ask a question, but what qualities would you say that disabled people particularly can bring? I mean, you've mentioned it already, perhaps being a strength in some of their experiences, but what qualities would you say that disabled people could bring to Christian leadership?
Yeah, and that might be upfront leadership. That might just be in lots of different contexts.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I think one of the things that people struggle with as Christians is acknowledging that we haven't got it all together. somehow we've imbibed this idea that the Christian good news or the gospel is that we're basically, you know, we're fine, we're together, and God sort of, you know, just we need a bit from God. Actually, the reality is we don't have it together. We need God's forgiveness for our sin. We are weak, and we need His strength. And I guess disabled people are able to acknowledge that, you know, we find life hard. We don't have it together, and that can sort of play people on side so that they can start to do that themselves. That they can say, actually, you know, I find life hard, but I keep it hidden away. Whereas your disability, Matt, it's a bit more obvious that that things are tough. But you saying, you know, when I say, and I guess if I say it from the front, when I say, actually, I find life hard sometimes, or I've really struggled this week, when I don't hide that, I think that gives others permission to be the reality about who they are, and to say, do you know what, that's the same for me too. I've had a tough week, and I need God's grace and His help.
Wow, great. A really good point to end it on. Thank you so much, Matt, for some great wisdom, great insights. Hopefully that's really been encouraging to people this morning. And I guess we'd love to continue the conversation. And if we can bring you back at some point, that'd be great. But shortly we're going to go into breakout rooms and pick up a couple of questions to get some interaction between each other. So thank you, Matt. Really appreciate your presentation and Q&A. Brilliant.